Part 70. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 692. The mob is so easy to incite. In a manor in the countryside of the royal capital, more than a dozen newspapers were spread out on the table in a mess. In addition, there are 70 or 80 cheat sheets, wall posters, and message notes, with different lengths and widths, and different paper types, piled up into a small paper mountain. An almost transparent palm that had been out of the sun for a long time stretched out from the cuff and stirred in the pile of paper. Raising his hand, a dozen pieces of paper fell from his fingers and scattered all over the table. It seems that there are still many people in the royal capital who hate this mage Nordmark and want him to get out. Then can we take action? In the corner of the room, a skinny man rushed forward. The man before shook his head slightly. Don't be anxious, don't be anxious. Don't be so reckless and expose us right away. Speaking of which, how was the quarrel at the officers' club? The army is very angry. They have already contacted everyone and plan to find a time to come to the door. The thin man smiled contemptuously. On the other hand, the Navy has not come to a conclusion yet. It's so funny. Their military family members were bullied, but they didn't want to come forward. The man who made the decision snorted coldly. If the quarrel doesn't produce any results, try to stumble them and don't let them hold them back. By the way, what's the attitude of their superiors about those guys who want to cause trouble? Lord Sauron went hunting with the husband of the false king, and he was probably gone for at least 3 days. Knight Remus's mother was sick in bed and asked for leave. In other words, the leaders of this group of people adopted an attitude of acquiescence or staying out of the matter. It's also normal. No man likes his wife to be touched by others, even if he is the queen's husband. The chatter in the secret room became quieter and quieter. Finally, the candle flickered, and a spark of flame fell on the table, burning all the newspapers and notes. Once the sparks fall, they will not be easily extinguished unless someone extinguishes them. After Gretel received the warning, a group of people came to the door in just a few days. Remember, we are not here to cause trouble, but to seek justice for the sisters who are suffering. As they walked, someone in the crowd raised their voice and gave instructions to their companions. So no matter what the situation, don't hurt the expectant mother, and don't hurt the newborn baby. You can smash things, but try not to hit people. The best case is to force the person in charge inside to have a good talk and give the brothers a insure. Then, what if he refuses to come out? Someone in the crowd hesitated. Are there any spellcasters there? What if they attack directly? Don't worry, the leader said. I have inquired about it a long time ago. Most of the spellcasters inside are priests of the Spring Temple. The temple has not said anything about this matter, and the priests will not come forward. Besides, he opened his clothes, revealing what was in his inner pocket, and flashed quickly. We are also prepared. As long as we survive the first wave, aren't there still knights in our group? With several guarantees coming together, the army brothers finally moved forward boldly and high-spirited. From a distance, I could see dozens of people standing bustling in front of the big iron gate of the hospital. Seeing them coming, I timidly shrank into the alley. What do these people do? Who knows? Leave them alone. The leader waved his hand. Immediately someone knocked on the door. What's the fuss about? It's not time yet. Someone inside the iron gate answered gruffly. The leader was startled, and before he could react, he heard another voice advising. Forget it, it's almost time. Open the door and let them pick up the wife and children. The one with the weird accent must be those northern barbarians. The leader sighed and made a few gestures to the side, telling everyone to get ready, and rushed in as soon as the door opened. It's better to go inside and make trouble than to have everyone break down the door. With a long, unpleasant creaking sound, the heavy iron door slowly opened. Then, The few army soldiers at the front raised their heads, raised their heads, raised their heads. Who will tell him why the person who opened the door is so much taller than him? What are you doing here? It was Bernard who stood at the door. He pushed the door open with one hand and held the door latch with the other hand. He was almost as tall as the others and could not hold it with one hand, and pointed forward. Get out of the way, get out of the way. Let me pick up my wife and children. As for you, don't get in the way here. Without even using the stick to sweep out, with just one finger, the army brothers on both sides separated in an uproar. Bernard turned half sideways. For such a tall barbarian, his voice suddenly softened. Don't be anxious, don't be busy, it's okay to walk slowly. Your husbands and families are waiting outside, Bruce, your wife and child are out. Come and pick them up. After shouting twice, someone came timidly from the alley across the street. Bernard held the door latch in his hand and lined up with another barbarian on both sides. His eyes were like lightning, and he shot around. Why is he looking at us like this? That's right, are we going to beat up the mother? We are honorable soldiers, not hooligans. Army brothers whisper. After all, they still retained a little bit of honor and did not take action. They just watched quietly as the family members emerged from the street and came forward one after another at the greetings of the barbarians. Then he took his wife and children, and left one after another, struggling for more than half an hour. Everyone is gone. Brothers, come on. However, once it was vigorous, it waned again, and finally exhausted. After waiting for such a long time, it was a bit lacking in momentum when it started again. The door was hammered, the door was hammered, the door was hammered again, the sound was loud, but the shouting was always a bit out of breath. Come out. Come out quickly. How do you treat a military wife? Come out and apologize. You must apologize. Open the door. Don't think you can escape by hiding inside. After hammering for a while, the leading guy was considering whether to use a ladder to climb over the wall, when he heard a group of people coming noisily from the other end of the long street. Seeing them hammering the door, I was stunned for a moment, and immediately quickened my pace. Hurry up. Someone came to the hospital to cause trouble. Fortunately, we are here. Come on, brothers. Boom, 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 boom. A group of young men rushed up and started fighting with fists and kicks without saying a word. The leader quietly took 2 steps back, observing the other party while commanding from the center, and suddenly shouted. Why are you beating us? That hospital is bullying you family members of the Navy. If you don't help protest, why are you beating us? You're the one I'm going to hit. The new guy punched him. The mage inside invented a new magic potion to help us fight against the sea plague, 1 punch. Penicillin was invented so that we wouldn't die from infection while bumping into each other at sea, a punch. In order to keep us alive on the battlefield, I wrote a pamphlet on battlefield first aid and asked the god of war priest to teach us all, 1 punch. In order to prevent us from bleeding to death, we invented methods of blood testing and blood transfusion, a particularly hard punch. Even if he didn't use magic to relieve pain, he at least allowed Stephen's wife to survive. He saved 2,000 gold coins in treatment fees. What else do you want? What else do you want? The punches rained down. In the administrative building of the hospital, Greet opened his secret eyes to the visiting nobles with a smile on his face. Look, everyone, the current situation in our hospital is like this, huh? Not good. Army Red Deer and Navy Red Deer are fighting. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. For those of you who haven't given me a guaranteed monthly ticket, give it to me quickly. Thanks to @Xiao for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Muijio Jinlin for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 693. The entrance to the hospital was filled with smoke. The Navy had fewer people, but they were united and full of momentum. The Army had more people, but they were stunned by friendly forces when they came up, and then they were beaten and scolded, making them even more scattered. After a while, the Army guys came to their senses and began to organize a counterattack. Both sides were throwing fists and yelling at each other. "We are standing up for your family." "How ungrateful." "Taking the opportunity to harass, who knows what you are thinking. You barbarians who come here to beg for food every day. You lobster soldiers. Traitors who don't even have the title of Wang family. At #UN%. %UN #at. Greet stared at the light screen with a solemn expression. He looked a little nervous, but he was smiling in his heart. He, I told you to harbor evil intentions, made you come to your home to cause trouble, and made you be instigated by others. Let you in, God knows what conspiracy is behind it. Deserve it? Greet had not done anything in the past few days after being informed by the Baroness. Instead, he asked the Baroness to introduce him and quietly went to see the commander of the Royal Navy Fleet. They walked in, exchanged greetings, and then, with a touch of space, a stack of newspapers was spread out on the coffee table between the two of them. Ah, this. Seeing those shocking headlines in the newspaper, the commander immediately felt a little embarrassed. He stretched out his calloused palms, grabbed the newspaper, balled it up, and stuffed it into the trash can. Your Majesty, Master, this is really not what our military meant. We will always keep your help to the Navy in mind. I also know that it's not you who are adding fuel to the fire. Gretel smiled slightly. He took out another chip and held it between his fingertips, while the magic power slowly flowed. Soon, the image of the mother-in-law rose from the top of the chip. Pay her? Are you kidding? What woman doesn't feel pain when giving birth? She's just pretentious, but she wants to live or die. Why should my son spend the money he earned at sea like this? Don't even think about it. The old woman had gray hair and dense wrinkles on her face, making her look very fierce. She put one hand on her hips and waved the other hand vigorously, foaming at the mouth. The feeling given to the naval commander was like sailing against the wind and waves late at night, the sail ropes whipping, and giant squids and monsters rushing towards him with their claws bared. The nurse in the hospital stood in front of her, gentle and quiet, delicate and timid, like a shy little flower. She asked cautiously. Otherwise, how about another analgesia? You see she is in so much pain. No. I won't do it even if it hurts so much. Hasn't it hurt me when I gave birth to a son? Is she so delicate? The light and shadow disappeared, and the sound was cut off. Gretel had a smile on her face and said in a sincere voice. During this period, we have been slandered by many false reports, which is really troublesome. Originally, I wanted to release this evidence. The commander's face immediately became nervous. No spellcaster is an innocent little white rabbit, and no spellcaster is willing to watch himself being splashed with dirty water. I didn't fall out before, I was just accumulating strength. I'm desperate. With the support of the Parliament and the support of the legendary mage, do people really dare not show this image all over the city? But then I thought about it, the mother's husband is a brave soldier of our navy, fighting for the Queen at sea. Gretel leaned forward and continued to smile. If these things are made public, it will be very difficult for him to return. When I heard that someone accused the hospital to her face and ran away crying, he immediately arranged for people to talk to the mother's family, leaving a magical image. He is absolutely experienced in this area. In the emergency department, if you don't have the skills to deal with medical troubles, you still want to be the deputy director? You are right, the commander nodded repeatedly. If it is really made public, Will it be the hospital that will be ugly? Not even the mother's family. If this is really released, I am afraid that the husband will find that he is already dead as soon as he returns to the port. Even if he dies alone, I am afraid that the entire navy will be criticized. Thank you for your understanding, His Majesty. The commander crossed the long table, took Gretel's right hand with both hands, and shook it vigorously. If you think about us like this, we will never let your reputation be damaged. Don't worry, we can find people from several major newspapers in the capital. As for the tabloids, which one was the first to slander you, I will tell you, take someone to sweep it. Hey, don't worry, Gretel smiled. Once the upper levels are taken care of, the middle and lower levels cannot be ignored either. After all, the work still has to be done by the middle and lower classes, and they cannot be allowed to carry out resentments and act against the will. Young men in the Navy, after reading these reports, I'm afraid many of them have opinions about the hospital. He tapped the surface of the coffee table with his finger, pretending that the newspapers were still there. I think it's better to have a good chat with them first. I'll take care of this, Your Excellency. The commander immediately patted his chest. Greet waved her hand slightly. No, I think that instead of trying to refute the rumors, it would be easier to attract their attention by saying something more closely related to their vital interests. In this way, he took out a letter, which was written for him by a certain bishop of the Temple of the God of War in Nevis before he left for the royal capital. In this case, can you recommend me a war god bishop? It would be better if he is stationed in the navy and everyone is familiar with it. The next day, Greet and the bishop stood in front of dozens of naval officers in the large classroom. Greet talked eloquently. From various battlefield first aid methods such as hemostasis and bandaging, to blood tests and blood transfusions, to the prevention and treatment of common diseases suffered by sailors, to how to perform penicillin skin tests, to the antidote for the sea plague. As for the garrison bishop, he basically sat in the front row and listened with his ears pricked up. After Gretel spoke for a while, he added, "This was invented by the mage Nordmark." After talking about the navy, Greet went to visit the Spring Temple through the introduction of Archmage Seymour of the Royal Mage Corps. He doesn't expect them to help him, but at least show an attitude that the mage group in the capital will support him. After running through several aspects, I took advantage of the opportunity of giving the Queen a routine inspection and proposed to invite some nobles to come and visit. Of course, it would be best if some nobles have connections in the military or the media. Then, I was lucky enough to see the Navy Red Deer and the Army Red Deer playing ping-pong at the entrance of the hospital. Nonsense. Ridiculous. Viscount Garter, nephew of the Thundering Sword Master and Secretary of the Knights of Thorns, slapped his hand on the table, his whole body shaking with anger. These guys in the army are becoming more and more lawless. If this continues, how can we rely on them to protect the Queen's safety? Mage Nordmark, wait a minute, I'm going to catch them all. This is too much. Hey, Your Excellency Viscount, don't be angry, don't be angry. Greet smiled and waved his hand. He took out a scroll and handed it to Joanna. Please throw a spider web spell to trap them all, and then pull them in one by one. Bernard will cooperate with you, Bernard. Bernard played the vanguard, and Joanna took several priests from the Spring Temple and Mr. Thomas, a medical mage from the Royal Mage Corps, to go out to provide spell coverage. Lord Apa held the line. Several times the magic power was shot through the wall, it was like a whirlwind. After a while, Bernard returned quickly with a serious face. Boss, I found something wrong with the person who came to make trouble. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Is there a guaranteed monthly pass that was not given to me? Throw it out quickly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 694. The conference room suddenly became quiet. The group of nobles invited by Gretel are all over 40 years old. I have fought in the palace, fought on the battlefield, managed territories, and experienced coups. Everyone is instinctively alert to all kinds of ups and downs, conspiracies, and plots. If it was just a group of big-headed soldiers who didn't know the truth, they might just be instigated by the stakeholders to give Gretel a bad look. However, something was wrong. What on earth is it? Gretel raised his voice and asked. Bernard shook his head. I don't know, boss. You'd better come out and take a look. Mr. Thomas said it's best not to open this thing indoors. A group of people filed out. Walking to the open space outside the administrative building, I saw a group of army soldiers with their heads downcast, tightly wrapped in spider webs, and navy officers and soldiers watching with wide eyes. The priests of the Spring Temple stood far apart, wearing as much protective magic as possible on their bodies. The security guards carried homemade shields and stood in front of them. In the open space in the center of the crowd, the medical mage Mr. Thomas commanded two invisible servants to raise a cocoon formed by a spider web. A hole was opened in the upper part of the cocoon, and there was a shining light inside, as if there was something suspicious. Appa stood next to Master Thomas, his muscles all tense, as if he was ready to pick up the master and escape at any moment. Bernard came closer to Gretel and explained. At first, Appa stopped people from letting them pass. Smart Appa, keen Appa. Greet gave the silver moon deer a thumbs up, waved his mage hand to scratch it, and then threw a detection magic over. Well, although this magic is used by Gretel as an X-ray every day, its real function is to detect the presence of magic items and magical creatures. Look, there it is. A bright light flashed in the meditative field of vision, and the brightness was especially obvious in the hole where the cocoon was dug. Greet threw another appraisal spell over. Fireball technique. What? Several voices asked questions at the same time. Gretel's face was solemn. Back off. Back off. Get out 20 meters away. Mr. Thomas, transport this guy out to the open space outside the back wall. Without his order, the female priests of the Spring Water Temple quickly dispersed. Appa lowered his head, nudged Master Thomas with his nose, and tried his best to urge. Move away quickly. Move away quickly. The boss has spoken, please move this thing away. Mr. Thomas leaned next to the silver moon deer with a serious face, instructing the two invisible servants to keep their steps as steady as possible to avoid shaking the thing. Gretel took a deep breath. The identification technique tells me that this is a fireball spell. As for whether it is a fireball spell scroll or a related magic device, whether it is detonated by the person holding it or remotely detonated, I cannot tell for the time being. He wants your life. Viscount Garter's face looked a little ugly. If you want to kill the Nordmark mage, or if you want to use a fireball at the Royal Maternity and Infant Hospital, the nature of the matter will become more serious. It's even possible. This is to cut off the Queen's medical assistance and to murder the Queen. Beside Greet, the royalist nobles all had solemn expressions on their faces, and knives almost flew out of their eyes as they stared at the cocoon. The cocoon squirmed a few times, and seemed to hear Greet's narration, and suddenly began to scream. What? Fireball. Why fireball? They told me it's a shield. It's something used to protect your life when you're attacked by a spell. There was a moment of silence. Then, Viscount Garter let out a long sigh. Can you hand that guy over to us? This conspiracy seems to involve the Queen, and we have to dig deeper. Don't worry, the royal family will give you an explanation, and the army will also give you an explanation. Greet shrugged. It's not that he doesn't want to do it. In fact, he really wants to get rid of this dirty work of torture, interrogation, and probing the conspiracy behind it right away. It's not like he's looking for the patient's allergens or the source of the disease. But the problem is, handing people over like this. Wait a minute. Invite a magician from the Royal Mage Corps. I don't know how to remove this thing tied to him. If it reaches halfway, there will be a loud bang. Even if it doesn't kill the interrogators or transport personnel, if it kills this person alive, who does it belong to? What? Let Gretel take over? Greet said, I am not a bomb disposal expert. Let the professionals handle this kind of explosive disposal. So the cocoons had to be left outside the back wall of the hospital. Gretel looked around and shouted. Cirella! Hey, Miss Yinlong jumped out excitedly and geared up. Do you want me to demolish it? I'm not afraid of it exploding. I'll do it. Do not. Not to mention whether it will be injured, even if it is dismantled without incident, it may not be a good thing. You know, the way this kind of thing is made may also have a personal imprint, which may become an important clue. Worst of all, you can still use magic to track it. Cirilla, go take a look around and see if there is anyone suspicious. Okay, no problem. Miss Yinlong kicked her ass on the spot and flew up. Elevate, level, and fly outward. Gretel raised his head and watched her leave, murmuring. The king can fly, right? It should be fine, right? Master Thomas's eyes were duller than his. Well, there are slums near the hospital. No one will care about it anyway. You should just fly wherever you want. Greet left a group of people to guard the cocoon and sent the medical staff to do whatever they needed to do. After a while, Cirilla came back unhappy and fell to the ground. Nothing was found. She was dejected. If she had a tail, it would probably have dropped to the ground by now. Greet quickly comforted her. It's okay, it's okay. Please go out, just in case. If the person behind the scenes was really smart, he would probably have quietly retreated when he saw the two groups of people fighting. In fact, it is just to prevent someone from coming to monitor and prepare to remotely detonate the fireball technique. It's a good thing that no discovery was made. It's best for the mage from the Royal Mage Corps to come quickly and take the cocoon away. They can check it as they please. Gretel's worries are also the worries of the nobles. Seeing that the alarm was lifted, Viscount Garter breathed a sigh of relief and came over to discuss. Can these unlucky guys be handed over to us first? They are all those guys from the light cavalry regiment who are not strict in running the army. Don't worry, I will ask their commander to come to apologize later and smash the tabloid by the way. You want no matter how much gold coins they compensate, they just ask for it. Gretel really wanted to say, just pay the 20,000 gold coins for me. But it's a pity that this kind of thought can only circulate in my stomach. He smiled slightly. There's no need to talk about money. I do have an idea. I hope to popularize a technology in the army. If it can be done, it will be more beneficial to the safety of the boys on the battlefield. Just say it. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 695. Chapter 694. Are you thinking of another way to kill Gretel? Oh no, something big has happened. Gretel proposed that he wanted to popularize a certain technology, and Viscount Garter agreed with a smile on his face, but felt uneasy in his heart. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. There is no spellcaster who, even if someone steps on his face, would still smile and want to help the person who hurt him. No matter how euphemistic the wording is, no matter how noble the goal sounds, this will definitely cost the army. If not, he dared to chew the metal of thorns dryly without adding pepper or salt. He was still worried secretly, but someone next to him immediately exploded. Miss Yinlong raised her eyebrows, and the silver blue pendant between her eyebrows was flowing with brilliance, eager to burn. Gretel, you can't always be like this. Others are coming to your door, and you still want to help them. Doesn't this encourage others to hit you again? According to me, you should just hit them with a fireball. Eh, eh, Gretel smiled and raised his hand, pressing it down slightly to reassure Cyrilla not to lose her temper in a hurry. Miss Yinlong muttered, turned away, and stamped her foot on the ground. Boom! Viscount Garter felt the ground shake, and his feet went soft. He was horrified, glanced at Cyrilla quickly, and quickly turned away to avoid her attention. What level of warrior is this silver-haired elf lady? Even if he was already a level 11 knight, he felt a little overwhelmed by the power that just overflowed in this moment. He was shocked in his heart and looked away again. Naturally, he didn't see Cyrilla pricking up her ears and quietly turning in Greet's direction. Greet also pretended not to see it and looked at Viscount Garter with a smile. It's like this. I visited the Navy a few days ago and talked with a bishop from the Temple of the God of War. I found that the technology of blood testing and blood transfusion has not been popularized among the healers in the army. It is not conducive to the rapid recovery of the army's combat effectiveness. Viscount Garter looked solemn. He had indeed heard about the techniques of blood testing and blood transfusion. Before the United Fleet went to sea, the healers from the Temple of the God of War had trained them many times. It is said that the effect is really good, allowing knights who are seriously injured and losing too much blood to recover quickly and return to the battlefield. However, this Nordmark mage wants to do this. Can he do it? Then, he saw Greet take out a journal with a smile and hand it to him. On the cover of the journal, the author under the relevant article clearly says Gretel Nordmark. Yes, that group of Marines mentioned when they were fighting outside that Master Nordmark developed blood testing and blood transfusion related spells for them. 1 month before the departure of the Nevis fleet, they came to me for training. Gretel continued with a smile. I found that they didn't master the technology of blood transfusion very well, whether it was injecting needles, taking blood, or transfusion, there were big problems. That time, I trained them for nearly a month, and many of them were young men from the Navy. Practice. I understand, you just want to turn these young guys from the army into hedgehogs, right? To avenge a private vendetta, and practice your skills at the same time? Viscount Garter thought about it and realized that this was indeed a good idea. At the very least, it would be beneficial to everyone for the priests of the Ares Temple and other healers to be familiar with blood transfusion operations. As for the dozens of holes the boys were poked into, please, who asked them to go to the hospital and break down the door? That's a place for healers. It is a place that can save their lives and the lives of their future wives and children. Deserve it? There's no problem with that, he said in high spirits. The conditions for compensation required by Master Nordmark are that they must be righteous and caring, and they must be caring and caring. It makes sense no matter where you talk. As for the boys howling and screaming, who told them to do something wrong? By the way, I'm not finished yet. Greet continued to smile. He pointed to the obstetrics building in front of him, and his fingertips drew a long arc along the obstetrics building, Xiaobai building, and Qiangwei building. Invite the priests from the Temple of the God of War to come over and train on skills. If the mother has severe hemorrhage, ask them to transfuse the mother's blood. Don't worry, I will control the amount. Each person will not give more than 400 milliliters every 6 months. Viscount Garter's eyes immediately widened. Mr. Master, you want the army to serve as a free blood bank? This is too. Before he could decide whether to agree or refuse, Gretel calmly added. Medical actions always have risks. Even if it is a cesarean section, there is no guarantee that there will be no major bleeding. Now that I have accumulated some experience in blood transfusion reactions, I will be able to better face unexpected situations when diagnosing and treating the Queen. Viscount Garter shut up immediately. Next to them, Sarala turned her back to them, her ears turned left and right, and the corners of her mouth curled up quietly. Greet, it turns out that even when cut open, he is black. Compensation matters were negotiated. In addition to exerting pressure to get a group of major newspapers to whitewash Gretel and smashing a group of tabloids, the military also provided a team of army officers and soldiers to patrol the maternal and infant hospital, and also provide teaching aids and mobility for blood transfusion operations. Blood bank. As for whether these people would take revenge on the instigators after their blood was drawn, and how the military would investigate and clean up those behind the scenes, Gretel didn't care. Dirty work, don't come to me. Where Gretel can't see, something darker is happening. The manpower deployed by the glorious Holy See was indeed ready to detonate the fireball device and then take advantage of the chaos to assassinate him. However, before taking action, I saw the Navy and the Army fighting. Things have changed, run away. He turned around and left, walking through alleys, breaking into houses, and climbing through windows. He retreated several miles along the way, changed his clothes, and called a carriage to return to the manor. When I went to investigate again the next day, I found a team of guards patrolling back and forth at the entrance of the hospital, and another team of guards standing guard throughout the hospital. So what do we do? The defense of that hospital has been strengthened again, and it will be even more difficult to assassinate him. Do you want to cause something big? It's best not to be in the limelight. Look, the Courier, the Current Affairs, the Daily News, these major newspapers are all saying good things about the hospital. The news I know is that several tabloids were beaten up. The female reporter from Banana Daily was beaten up badly. Let's wait a little longer. Maybe something big will happen in the near future that will draw everyone's attention away. Big things happened quickly. Half a month later, with flags flying and masts like forests, a long row of ships arrived at the military port on the edge of the royal capital. The scorch marks, broken wood, and marks of cuts and axes on the hulls of the ships tell the story of the battles they have experienced. On top of every mast, the flag of the Kingdom of Kent flies proudly high. Among the fleet, there are several ships with obviously different shapes. There is a row of flags hung on the side of the ship. At a glance, they look so familiar. Big victory! Big victory! After the horn sounded, the herald on the flagship shouted excitedly. We defeated the Golden Fleet of the glorious Holy See. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 696. If Gretel was still in Nevis, if he visited the teacher more often, if he was favored enough by the Lord of Thunder. Then, he probably got the news of the destruction of the Golden Fleet more than half a month ago. Of course, it is also possible that the Lord of Thunder felt that his level was too low and he never cared about these national affairs, so he did not tell him anything. However, sooner or later, you win anyway. The streets of the royal capital were deserted, and people flocked to the port to see the returning fleet, so much so that the number of people hospitalized that day was reduced by half. There was so much excitement in the hospital that Greet had to give the healers and midwives a holiday in turn, allowing them to visit as they pleased. He stayed in the hospital until night, and finally waited for Cyrilla to take the lead and rush into the hospital. When I saw him, I grabbed him and started chattering impatiently. The fleet is huge. It stretches from the front of the palace for more than 10 miles, and there are many captured warships among them. In the royal capital, a wide river flows through the city, rushing into the sea with great force. And the fleet was able to sail upstream and reach the residence of the entire kingdom. According to Sarala, the most magnificent flagship should be parked directly at the entrance of the palace. Gretel couldn't help but think that if a cannon was set up at this time, it might be able to bombard the palace. Stop! Stop it! There is no cruiser Aurora here. Greet was distracted for a moment and quickly brought his thoughts back. Cyrilla was still dancing and describing. The biggest ship is twice as big as the humpback whale we took last time. It's just a captured one, but it smells bad. So much gold. Gold bars, gold nuggets, gold coins, silver coins, and precious stones were pulled down from the deck one by one. The head of the convoy entered the palace, and the tail has not yet disembarked from the farthest ship. Gretel smiled and watched her gesticulating and talking non-stop. When the silver dragon girl talked about gold, jewels and stones, her nose twitched, the capillaries on her cheeks expanded, and her pupils unconsciously dilated. Those beautiful silver blue eyes were turning and turning, almost turning into gold coins on the spot. Greet did a quick mental calculation. Assuming that a carriage including horses and the distance between the front and rear needs to occupy 20 meters, 1 kilometer is 50 carriages. From the palace to the rear of the fleet, 10 kilometers is equal to 500 carriages. Assume that each carriage carries 1,000 kilograms. If each ship contains gold and silver coins, this fleet is equivalent to intercepting approximately 500 tons of gold and silver. If a gold coin weighs 10 grams, then 500 tons of gold is equivalent to approximately 50 million gold coins. 50 million. If you give it all to Miss Yinlong, not to mention making the bed, it can completely cover the entire dragon cave. Suck, suck, suck. Calm down. He pinched his thigh hard. The cargo of the Golden Fleet must be more silver and less gold. Moreover, hundreds of tons of gold and silver can only be loaded into one ship at most, and other ships will never come back empty. The bulk of the loot this time should be various goods, such as pepper, carmine, tobacco, indigo, leather, etc., as well as various specialties of extraordinary creatures. When it comes to gold and silver, there really isn't much. We also have to share accounts with the dwarves, barbarians, vampires, and orcs. After the division is completed, the human side, the magic council, the queen, the nobles, and several temples have to sit down and continue to divide. The most that can fall into Cyrilla's hands is to take 1 or 2 gold coins to watch and play. If you want to make your bed with gold coins, it will be faster to dream. Or, after he and Cyrilla are both promoted to legend, will it be faster to grab the Golden Fleet again? Oh, what a pity, I don't know what happened during the battle. Greet sighed, leisurely and fascinated. Treasure fleet. Countless gold and gems. The glorious Holy See must have concentrated its elite forces to escort them. If they want to break this hard bone, it will definitely be a shocking battle. When can I see the battle report? If you are in Nevis, you can also ask your brothers and sisters, or talk to some of the archmages in the review committee. But in the royal capital, those who are not familiar with the place can only rely on the editing and printing speed of the newspaper. As for the level of these newspapers in the royal capital, Greet was not optimistic at all. You can spread his negative news everywhere without verifying it at all. Snort. Gretel will hold a grudge. But if the newspaper cannot be trusted, they want to know the details of this battle. Humph, I'm not in a hurry for a day or two anyway, Gretel muttered to comfort himself. No big deal, when I get back to Nevis, I'll go find my senior brothers and sisters to find out the details. Greet, who said this, did not expect that the details would soon be delivered to his door. That night, a carriage inlaid with the family emblem stopped at the entrance of the administrative building. Baroness Vitegwe walked into Greet's office with a smile and handed over an invitation. Tomorrow night, the Queen will hold a welcome banquet for the victorious soldiers. The Queen heard that you have made a great contribution to this expedition, and specially invites you and Miss Cyrilla to the banquet. Do I have to go? Greet began to look around. The characteristic of obstetrics is that the maternal condition can deteriorate at any time, and a vaginal birth that goes well may require a cesarean section at any time. He was not in the hospital and was away for a long time. What if there happened to be a cesarean section and Joanna and the others had a miscarriage? Do you have to go? Cyrilla wasn't very interested either. Miss Yinlong's curiosity about the palace and the queen had been satisfied last time, going to attend a special banquet again. Well, there are many people, the air is not good, it is chaotic and noisy. The queen is very old now. If this victory was not of great significance, she would not hold the banquet. The Baroness observed her words and immediately smiled. Although the healers from the Spring Water Temple will be with her, they are not foolproof. Therefore, I would like to ask your excellency, master, to attend the banquet no matter what. Gretel obliged and immediately nodded in agreement. Seeing that he agreed, Cyrilla no longer expressed any objection, but was just a little embarrassed. The Baroness turned to her and smiled. It is said that part of the captured gold treasures will be displayed at the banquet. Hey! I will definitely be there tomorrow. Cyrilla's eyes lit up instantly. After thinking about it, she couldn't help but ask. Do you need new clothes or new jewelry? This. Miss, you still have a few sets of jewelry you can wear that can surpass the queen. While Cyrilla was carefully checking her jewelry, the new pope in the Glory Holy City was furious. Incompetent. Trash. There was no information about such a big operation beforehand. Those pagans are so vile and shameless. As humans, they would actually contact the vampires and orcs to deal with us together. Go. Contact the electors of the Rhine Kingdom, contact the kings and dukes of the Carolingian Kingdom. Organize a fleet to attack the Kingdom of Kent and punish those heretics. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 697. His Majesty the Pope is going crazy. The Golden Fleet. That's the Golden Fleet. The Golden Fleet that travels from the mainland to the New World sets sail 3 times a year and returns 3 times a year. At one time, the Rhine Kingdom took the lead, and the 7 princes and other nobles in the kingdom sent people to participate. The size of the fleet was about 20 warships. Once led by the Carolingian Kingdom, the king, royal family, subordinate principalities, and other large and small nobles participated. Fleet size, approximately 30 ships. The largest one was exclusively owned by the Glory Holy See. Gold, silver, various treasures, and other New World specialties collected from various Governor-General offices in the New World were shipped and transported uniformly. This fleet has a scale of 50 ships, with a total cargo capacity of more than 10,000 tons. Although the people who desperately ran the ships were basically businessmen, and the Holy See only sent out a convoy fleet, the direct benefit the Holy See derived from it was 1/5 of the fleet's cargo capacity. And the remaining 4/5 will be poured into the territory under the jurisdiction of the Holy See in various ways. The fleet was destroyed. Not only was their vitality severely damaged, at least they were stabbed hard in the chest. Moreover, 8 large warships were destroyed and the personnel were captured. The replacement of these ships and manpower was a heavy burden. Large warships, especially the flagship of this escort fleet, the Unicorn sailing battleship, this kind of ship cannot be built in a year or two. During its construction, more than 4,000 oak trees were used. The rafts transporting oak trees stretched out in a long row on the river, with no end as far as the eye could see. In addition, the altars, pulpits, tables, chairs, window frames, etc. of dozens of churches were also demolished, and even the beams of 2 old churches were demolished. Use these oak and rosewood that have been soaked with holy power for many years to lay the keel of the ship and build a holy power channel on the ship. These accumulations cannot be accomplished overnight. The losses of this fleet must be recovered in some way. After this defeat, we must take revenge severely, otherwise it will damage the majesty of the Holy See. The royal family of the Kingdom of Kent. Magic Council. Dwarves, barbarians, vampires, orcs, you wait. Issuing a summons order, ordering the Rhine Kingdom and the Carolingian Kingdom, the royal family and the earls and above to send representatives to assemble in the Holy City within a month. Discuss the matter of assembling the fleet and expedition to the Kingdom of Kent. While the Pope was banging the table, the royal palace of the Kingdom of Kent was filled with fragrant clothes and shining jewels. Gretel held Cyrilla on his arm and was guided by Baroness Viteg towards the queue of spellcasters. You really don't need me to keep an eye on you all the time. You don't need me to turn on the electrocardiogram and fetal heart rate monitoring and monitor the Queen's condition remotely. It's really not necessary. The Baroness opened her lips and smiled. Among the Queen's skirt-bearing maids, there are 2 female priests from the Spring Temple, one a 2nd level and one a 4th level. Among the close female officers, there is also a high-level priest above the 10th level. In other words, if there is a problem, magical support can be provided at any time. As long as you stay around, we can find a place at any time. It's okay to go with the lady to look at the gold jewelry on display, or to look at the flagship on the balcony. Of course, we have to wait until after the triumphal ceremony. I know this without you having to tell me. Greet nodded and smiled at her, joining the queue of the royal mage group. They arrived not too early, and most of the invited guests had already arrived and lined up along the red carpet. As far as the eye can see, there are glitters of silk and jewelry. Archmage Seymour nodded and smiled at them, pointing to a place 3 steps away from him and close to the aisle for them to stand so that they could see the Queen up close. Not long after the 2 stood still, the main door of the hall opened. The 2 trumpeters stepped into the hall door and blew the brass horns with all their strength. The clear and loud trumpet sound attracted all the attention of everyone present. The sound of trumpets stopped, and the Queen, accompanied by her maid, stepped into the hall and appeared in front of the guests. Cyrilla immediately took a small breath and sent a message to Gretel. She's actually wearing a military uniform. Although it is a military uniform that has been deliberately modified to suit pregnant women in their first trimester. However, the strict high collar, straight epaulets with gold embroidered edges, dark red woolen material, and complicated ribbons and medals are still the most obvious military uniform styles. He moved forward, his steps a little clumsy, but steady, with almost the same distance between each step. There was even a light sword slung around his waist, with a shiny scabbard. It was obviously a magical weapon treasured by the Wang family. Greet looked solemn. He also activated the messaging technique and answered Cyrilla softly. She has to wear military uniform to participate in the triumphal ceremony after such a long month. She obviously wants to bring the military back to her heart and want the troops on this expedition to love and support her. This Queen is not simple. As he spoke, he looked around, and sure enough, the eyes of the military noble group not far away lit up one by one. Obviously, the Queen's statement made them very excited, and they felt that the Queen understands us and the Queen is one of our own. Of course, Greet was happy to see this scene. A queen who is willing to endure hardships and put down her figure is better than a queen who is extravagant and indulgent, even if the floods surge after my death. At present, the Kingdom of Kent is weaker than the glorious Holy See. Only a clear-minded ruler can unite the nobles, the Magic Council, and various temples to make the kingdom prosper. When the kingdom is well, everyone will have a good life, right? Thinking like this, the Queen was almost walking in front of him with firm and powerful steps. Greet grabbed Cyrilla and followed the example of the nobles around her, bowing exactly the same. Just do as the Romans do and give each other face. Anyway, No one will find fault with the magician's unstandardized etiquette, so that's pretty much it. After the queen walked down the red carpet and sat on the throne, the trumpeter blew the brass trumpet again. The master of ceremonies shouted, "Commander of the expeditionary force, Earl Islet, please come to see me. All squadron commanders, please see me." After giving the order, a group of people walked quickly on the steps at the entrance of the hall. The military uniform is straight, the military boots are shiny, and the dark green cape is flying high behind him. Everyone stood straight and looked serious, filled with infinite joy and pride. Although the orderliness of the steps could not match the level of the honor guard of the three armed forces, the fierce momentum of a group of high-level knights walking together made Gretel unable to breathe. The first person, I don't know. The second person, I don't know. Looking back, Greed saw an acquaintance at a glance, Knight Drake, the commander-in-chief of the Parliament's Third Fleet. The other party also saw him at the same time, nodded almost imperceptibly, and exchanged glances with him. With a relaxed look on his face and an upturned corner of his mouth, it seemed that the fleet dispatched by the Parliament went smoothly this time and gained a lot. Gretel was slightly relieved. It doesn't matter what the outcome of the battle is. I just hope that nothing unexpected happens to his acquaintances, especially the group of spellcasters he has trained. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 698. Throughout the ceremony, Greed stood at the edge of the red carpet and watched with interest. Watching Earl Islet lead the squadron commanders forward quickly and come to the front of the throne. Watching them perform military salutes in unison and collectively greet the Queen. Watching the Queen put a medal on the Earl, she then pulled out her sword and tapped him on the shoulder, naming him a Knight of the Guard. Watching Earl Islet stand up and stand on the side of the throne, he reported to the Queen, or rather announced to the guests present, the course of this battle. Our fleet set off on October 7 and after 2 months of sailing, we arrived at Bess Bay. Gretel listened quietly for a long time before he realized that this battle involved 4 fleets setting off separately to perform different tasks. The 2 royal fleets sailed straight into the New World, found a place to ambush, and waited quietly. The 2 parliamentary fleets were divided into 2 groups to pick up people. One group went north to the Blackgate Peninsula to meet the barbarians who had been ready to go. After picking up the people, drive directly west to the northern end of the New World, and then go south along the coastline. The other branch went south to the northern end of the Black Continent to meet the vampires and orcs who were scheduled to meet there. It has to be said that this time the vampires and orcs also spent a lot of money. All the vampires slept in coffins and were transported by the orcs' small smuggling boats all the way out of the Continental Sea to the northern end of the Black Continent, the exit of the Continental Sea, and the port outside the Tarik Strait. The dangers and hardships involved are difficult to describe in words. And the large army of the orcs carried dry food on their backs and rode camels across thousands of miles of desert. Only in this way can we avoid the spies of the glorious Holy See and board the Parliament's ocean-going ship without knowing it. In the end, 4 fleets, consisting of 150 ships, blocked the returning fleet of the glorious Holy See near La Habana, the capital of the Storm Islands, in the Gulf of Tarsus. 150 versus 50. Vampires, orcs, and humans, a total of 4 legends were present. The 2 newly launched sailing battleships, the Victory belonging to the royal family and the Humpback Whale belonging to the Magic Council, as well as the alchemy ship Philosopher's Stone, attacked from 3 sides and besieged the Unicorn, the flagship of the Holy See's escort fleet. During the battle, the cardinal sitting on the Unicorn was forced to burn his life and released a divine spell, but he still failed to turn the tide of the battle. Wow! Sarala's eyes sparkled when she heard this, and she exclaimed softly. She stared at Earl Islet and quietly stretched out a finger to poke Greet's waist sideways. God's descent technique. I heard my father say that even an adult dragon can't withstand this kind of magic. That is a legendary level spell. Even if it's a dragon, it's best not to fight hard if it's not legendary. Not even if it's legendary. Spells are too variable. You can dodge if you can. Just from this magical technique, one can already imagine how thrilling the battle at that time was. There were 4 squadrons and 150 ships. In the end, only a little over 120 ships came back, a loss of nearly 1/5. Of course, the main ones that were damaged were small boats, and most of them were converted into fireboats and used to block the exit of the bay. There are also some who were unable to retreat during the divine descending technique, or were affected by the explosion. What about people? Hearing this, the queen leaned forward slightly and quickly asked, "Where are my brave warriors?" Thanks to Queen Hungfu, the sacrifices of the soldiers are not serious. The earl bowed and replied, "Barbarians and orcs are mainly responsible for fighting in gangs. Our people don't do much close combat." The guests laughed softly. Greet also smiled slightly. Although he had a good impression of those honest barbarians and forthright orcs, in any case, only humans were his kindred spirits. Knowing that relatively few of my own people died makes me happy no matter what. After reporting the results, continue reporting the results. Earl Islet bowed and said loudly, "Your Majesty, during this war, we blocked the 50 ships of the glorious Holy See in the bay, and not one of them escaped. 23 ships were scuttled and 27 were captured, including the flagship Unicorn." After saying this, he paused for a moment, and his tone suddenly rose high, shaking the whole audience. "All of us have unanimously decided to dedicate the most valuable treasure among the spoils to your Majesty." As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 trumpeters at the entrance of the hall blew the brass horns again. Amidst the sound of the trumpet, a long line of sailors, working in groups of 2 and 2, carried rectangular shallow dishes and brought gold, silver, and jewelry directly to the emperor. "Wow!" Miss Silver Dragon whispered softly again. This time, Greet rushed to apply a round of armor to himself, and then attached a barbarian power, and finally resisted her subconscious grasp. The first lift was a golden disc with a diameter of more than 2 feet, on which were engraved human faces, the sun, numerous rings and endless symbols. The second one was a golden mask that was half a man tall. The feathers decorated on it clearly belonged to a high-level magical beast. The third lift is a gold crown inlaid with countless emeralds. The lower part of the crown is saddle-shaped, with a vase-shaped upper part standing in the middle, and 2 curved gold handles connected on both sides. The fourth one is a golden scepter that is as tall as a person, with a golden disc with a diameter of 1 foot attached to the top. Every time the 2 knights carrying it took a step, the wooden plate creaked painfully, and Gretel was very worried that it would break on the spot. "Cyrilla, Cyrilla!" Gretel shouted softly and struggled hard. Miss Yinlong woke up from a dream and quickly let go. Gretel finally breathed a sigh of relief. If he didn't let go, he would have to apply healing skills on himself. After presenting the representative treasures, Earl Islet continued to introduce everyone's achievements to the Queen. And the Queen followed the good deeds and rewarded them generously. The commander of the first squadron, Lord Yeovil, led the fleet to block the Gulf of Tarsus. He took the lead and faced the Holy See fleet. "Great Knight Yeovil, I will confer upon you the title of Vice Admiral and the Order of Thorns. I hope you will continue your efforts and make greater contributions to the kingdom." Commander of the second squadron, Grand Knight Brio, formation killing of the Holy Knights of the Holy See of Glory, Deputy Commander Knight Viry. Confer the title of Vice Admiral of the Navy, award the Medal of Thorns. Commander of the 3rd Squadron, Knight Derek. Awarding of the Medal of Narcissus. Commander of the 4th Squadron. Greet listened boredly, looking at the Queen intently from time to observe her state. This Queen is also really tough. She keeps standing there with a belly that is 8 or 9 months old, with a friendly attitude and a sincere smile. It's like the doctors and nurses in the hospital in the previous life who were still working when they were about to give birth. It is said that the director of their obstetrics and gynecology department was busy until delivery in the early years. He was still delivering babies for others in the morning and lying on the delivery bed by himself in the afternoon. You must do what you can, and don't overwork yourself and get pregnant. Even if divine magic can help, it cannot be used forever. After the 4 squadron commanders, a long line of meritorious soldiers were led up one after another. There are captains, bosuns, gunners, and spellcasters who are responsible for all aspects of work. Attack, defense, assistance, interference, treatment. Gretel almost fell asleep. In other words, if there weren't other care recipients to observe, he would really be asleep. Ah, when will it end? Can they be allowed to visit those gold and jewelry freely? Mage Nordmark, with his excellent medical skills, has made outstanding contributions to the health of fleet members. Mage Nordmark. Ah. What? Why should I get the medal? You didn't even notify me in advance. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 699. Greet walked onto the red carpet in a daze. In front, Earl Islet was still stating his achievements, his voice was like a bell, and the whole hall could hear clearly. Mage Nordmark invented a medicine to cure the plague at sea. Through this, we can convince allies of all races to join us on a long voyage. There was a burst of applause from below. In the applause, Greet saw many nobles whispering to each other and discussing in low voices, perhaps talking about long-distance shipping? Master Nordmark compiled the battlefield first aid rules and invented penicillin, which greatly reduced medical costs and allowed more young men to go home safely. The squadron commanders, captains, and healers lined up on both sides of the throne all showed friendly smiles to Gretel. In particular, several healers from the God of War temple had shining eyes, and it seemed that if they were not in front of the emperor, they would snatch him away to the temple. Mage Nordmark invented blood testing and blood transfusion methods, allowing high-level warriors to quickly recover their combat effectiveness after losing a lot of blood, which greatly enhanced the fleet's endurance. Gretel walked quickly. When he passed by the commander of the Second Fleet and the deputy leader of the Formation Knights, the knight raised his thumb and gave him a gesture of appreciation. In addition, Master Nordmark also made many inventions, which also brought considerable help to the fleet. For example, new rubber. Rubber pipes are very convenient for pumping water. They can be cut into sections and put on people to prevent drowning. Have you invented the lifebuoy? Greet opened her eyes wide. There is a saying, a rubber lifebuoy is indeed much more reliable than throwing some wooden boxes and wooden blocks. However, the problem of inflation, the problem of valve core. Won't everything be handed over to the transformation mage? While making the statement, he stepped forward step by step on the red carpet, exchanged a quick look with Earl Islet, and stood still in front of the queen. On the right, a young female officer in a long skirt held up a silver plate. The queen picked up a medal and smiled at him. Mage Nordmark, in view of your contribution to the kingdom, I award you the Golden Oak Leaf Medal. Please come forward. Greet's feet swayed, and he turned around and ran away. Golden oak leaves. How about adding a red cross and 2 more diamonds? Fortunately, his remaining sanity stopped him. Fortunately, the medal was just like an oak leaf with a diamond inlaid in the middle and no other decorations. The queen pinned the medal on him with her own hands, straightened the long green ribbon, and smiled at him. Mage Nordmark, I hope you can continue your efforts and make greater contributions to the kingdom. Gretel saluted her and thanked her. Fortunately, he was already the last person to receive the medal, and the queen quickly left the stage and entered the banquet stage where she chatted and walked around freely. Sarala jumped up immediately. Let me see, let me see. What is this medal for? Gretel threw an identification spell in a calm manner. A flash of light flashed, and the identification technique immediately responded. The diamond in the middle of the medal is enchanted with a triggering protective arrow, which is automatically restored once a week. If it can be placed in a strong energy environment, such as the element pool of the Mage Tower, it can be restored once a day. It's so annoying. Sarala curled her lips. Protect arrows is only a second-level magic. After Gretel has made such great contributions, the medal given by the queen actually has a second-level magic attached to it. Gretel became a disciple of the Lord of Thunder, and the gifts he received were all for at least level 3 and 4 magic. Ahem, Solara, you can't judge others by the legendary mage's handwriting. Gretel whispered. Before she finished speaking, Baroness Wittig came over and congratulated her with a smile. Congratulations to your excellency for receiving the Golden Oak Leaf Medal. This medal is awarded to spellcasters outside the royal family. It is one of the highest level medals. The wearer's position in the court is equivalent to that of an earl. She glanced at the golden oak leaf with envy. As far as I know, among spellcasters below level 10, you are the first person to receive this medal. Sarala raised her chin high, wrinkled her little nose, and snorted proudly. Of course. Gretel is so awesome. She dragged Gretel and happily lined up to see the gold plates, gold crowns, gold masks, and gold staffs. In the dark corner of the palace, someone was staring at Gretel in the shadows and talking in a low voice. It's him. It's him. Can you do it? It's difficult, there is a large-scale ceremony today. The palace has raised the alert level, and people are watching everywhere. You see, several members of the Royal Mage Group are not here, and some famous masters are not here either. They are probably all on guard secretly. I didn't say start now. The person who asked the question at the beginning was a little angry. The Holy See suffered a lot in this battle, and the higher UPS are very angry. If they knew that we couldn't complete the task, I'm afraid we would be dealt with extremely severely. Is there any way to lure him out to attack? Then it's still the original method. Detonate the plague somewhere in the royal capital and lure him over to see it. Is there an outbreak of plague somewhere recently? Are there any ready-made patients, or supplies that they have come into contact with, that can be used to spread the plague? This. The person giving the advice was speechless. To be honest, he rarely showed up before and hid in the manor every day. It was really difficult for him to collect the information as soon as possible. Hurry up and think of a way. If you don't do this well, you, me, and your daughter who marries to the Carolingian kingdom will all be in trouble. The proposer's whole body trembled, and a chill ran down his spine. The Glory Holy See retreated. Although they had all announced their conversion and returned to the embrace of the goddess of spring water, their relationship with the Glory Holy See was not so easy to cut off. Some people's daughters married across the strait, some people's young sons were priests of the Lord of Glory and were taken away with the Holy See, and some people married nobles from the Carolingian kingdom. Although for the sake of the stability of the kingdom, the queen did not pursue any serious charges after she ascended the throne, but when the Holy See of Glory sent people over, many of them had to bow their heads and obey orders. Let me think, he murmured quietly. His eyes passed through the window and fell on the brightly lit flagship on the river bank. His eyes suddenly lit up. We can let the other side find a way. Let the other side collect some patients and smuggle them over, or collect some items and send them over. If they can't do it, there is no reason to blame us. From the Kingdom of Kent to the opposite mainland, the narrowest point of the strait is less than 30 kilometers. In such a busy waterway, no matter how forbidden it is, people will sneak across at any time. What's more, the Kingdom of Kent, the Carolingian Kingdom, and the Rhine Kingdom have always had demand for each other's products. Messages and requests were sent quickly. Mr. Lucerne, the deputy chief referee who was sitting on the other side of the strait, read the letter and immediately responded. Those heathens actually dare to collude with foreign races. Didn't we catch a group of blood servants recently? Go. Send them all over. Let them bite them. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. I rewatched Surgery Room today and saw the scene about the Wenchuan earthquake again. Tears can't stop flowing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 700. Chapter 699 Blood Servant. Porphyria. Still. Blood servants are different from blood slaves. Blood slaves are humans raised by vampires to drink blood. Of course, some vampires have strong tastes and raise a bunch of beautiful orcs. As for dwarves and barbarians, generally speaking, the taste of vampires is not that heavy. But no matter what race they are, blood slaves maintain their original racial characteristics. Humans are humans when they are supposed to be, and cats, rabbits, and foxes are what they are supposed to be, and they will never change. As for the blood servants, they are the product of the vampires giving a little blood and forcibly changing their race. It can be said to be a degraded version of the vampires. Due to degradation, their strength is stronger than humans, but weaker than vampires. They are also afraid of the sun and will be harmed by it. They need to drink blood regularly. When the glorious Holy See catches a blood slave, it can also give him some treatment such as atonement and baptism according to different circumstances, but when it catches a blood slave, there is usually only one result. Put to death. They would be burned alive in the sun, or, if some blood servants died slowly, depending on the host's mood, a pyre would be set up and burned alive. Send those blood servants to the opposite side, the deputy referee of Lucerne ordered without hesitation. Tell them that if they can crawl to the door of the hospital, they will live, if they can't crawl, they will die. The guys opposite, the vast majority of people, will not have any mercy on them. Yes. Send someone to watch. If they are taken in, spread the word that the Royal Maternity and Infant Hospital has taken in a group of vampires. Yes. If they are handed over to the authorities, then spread the news that the royal family has executed a group of vampires and their partners who were fighting alongside them just now. Then, send the news back to the Glory Holy City and have people spread it to the vampires. But what? Are you going to disobey my order? Or do you sympathize with these blood servants? The deputy referee of Lucerne asked with a sneer. The priest who stood respectfully in front of him and had been recording orders raised his head and said hesitantly. But, I don't think they look like blood servants. What's that like? The deputy referee raised his eyebrows. The priest lowered his head and rushed to answer before his boss got angry. Like leprosy. The deputy referee's expression softened slightly. Whether it was a blood servant or leprosy, he only listened to a few sentences of the report. However, since the priest said so, he should go over and take a look. Lord Lucerne followed his subordinates to the prison and took a distant look at the filth deep in the cell through the iron bars. He turned around and left, returned outside, and cursed the priest. You can't even see the blood servants. You can actually see it as leprosy? Huh? Didn't you see their fangs? Didn't you see the bloody roots of the teeth? Didn't you see the bloody eyes? He scolded one after another, moving his fingers and poking at the priest's face. If you insist on saying it's leprosy, are you too poor, or do you still sympathize with these guys? The priest could only cry sadly and keep bowing his head in confession. The Grand Referee of Lucerne had no intention of arguing with him. He snorted coldly and walked away. The miserable priest was left behind to arrange ships, people, food, and water, and to intimidate the blood servants. There is only one way to survive. Remember to move forward and follow the person who leads the way. You must reach it, otherwise you will die. 3 days later, a merchant ship loaded with salted fish, potatoes, and linen swayed and docked in the kingdom of Kent. In the dead of night, the warehouse was opened, and dozens of poor people in ragged clothes were blasted to the shore and driven forward. Follow the light ahead. Go, go. If you can reach a place, you will live. If you can't reach it, you will die. Early the next morning, Gretel was woken up from his sweet dream. The person who called him was a local nurse. She finally didn't bang on the door, but her voice was not low at all. Your Excellency the Mage. Your Excellency the Mage Nordmark. Help. A group of vampires are coming to the door. Gretel. The vampires are coming? Are you here now? After the palace banquet, he had a few words with Commander Drake and learned that on their way back this time, they had left the vampires at the northern end of the Black Continent. So, some people were forgotten and were brought here all the time while lying in coffins? Or did another group of people go to Nevis and then stop by the royal capital to see themselves? He thought quickly, got dressed, opened the door and went out. The nurse's face was pale, and she was obviously frightened. Lord Bernard has already rushed over. Mr. Master, you. Just as Greet was about to speak to comfort him, 2 priests walked over quickly from across the corridor. One is the priest of the Spring Temple, and the other is the worshipper of the god of nature. They walked and argued along the way. Just let the guards drag this guy away. Why are you so close? What if he bites you and turns you into a vampire? They are not blood servants. They have no dark aura, they should just be patients. What's the situation? Gretel walked out quickly. There was a creak from the next door, and Miss Yinlong also opened the door and followed him out. When we walked to the gate of the hospital, it was just dawn, and there were a group of refugees huddled in clusters on the east and west outside the door. Gretel didn't even need to count. With a quick glance, he estimated that there would be about 40 or 50 people, who would fill a chair in the waiting area, and would require at least a dozen medical staff. The breeze blew by, and the stench that had accumulated for countless days immediately hit his nostrils, interrupting his thoughts. Reflexively, Greet and Cyrilla frowned at the same time. Gretel subconsciously turned his head, wanting to arrange for someone to build a shed and boil water for them to take a bath. However, after Cyrilla frowned, she let out a low sigh. They are not vampires. You sure? Greet looked forward hard. The distance was a bit far and he couldn't see the details of the opponent clearly, so he couldn't help but speed up his pace. Cyrilla nodded vigorously. That's right. Definitely not. They don't have the cold smell of the vampires. Under the tattered clothes and tightly wrapped headscarf, faces turned around with red spots and swelling. The skin on the face is covered with scabs, which are finely broken and covered with scales. His eyes were red and bloodshot, as if they might bleed at any moment. Ulcers at the corners of the mouth, cracked and swollen lips, pointed teeth, and bloody tooth roots exposed. Every feature looks the same as a degraded version of the vampire. Bernard had been standing at the door, holding the latch and watching. Seeing the refugees making a commotion and swarming over each other, I quickly raised the door bolt to stop them. Don't crowd, stand still. What about you? Don't come close. Wait until the boss calls. Greet turned a blind eye and observed intently. Cyrilla turned to look at him for a while, and saw that his eyes were focused on the refugee and did not leave. She reached out and tugged on his arm. Gretel, what are you looking at? Didn't I say they are not vampires? I know not, Gretel muttered in a low voice. I was just thinking, they were. Is it porphyria? Solar dermatitis? Purple skin? Or, some other disease? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 701. Which of you is the leader? Gretel shouted from a distance. As he asked, he flicked his fingers slightly and cast several spells on himself. Mage armor, shield, resistance to energy damage. At the same time, a space bag and several pieces of magic equipment fell silently into his pocket. The golden oak leaf medal, with its own protective arrows, is triggered once a week. The elemental endurance pendant given by Mr. Steiner, the protection mage time barrier. The golden bracelet given by Ms. Helena from the legendary conjuration system Song of the Deep Sea is blessed with 3 magics, flame burst, any door, and water wall. The tie clip given by Ms. Almeida from the legend of the enchantment and control system Philosopher's Rose can resist mental shock. Coupled with the endless ink pen that is always with you, it can trigger force field wall, resist mind control spells, and trigger teleportation spells. Basically, you have armed yourself into a person who can fight, carry, escape, and cast spells to relieve control. In addition to still having a weak sense of combat and having to rely on automatic triggering protective spells to survive the first wave, the survivability is already impressive. Such a large group of people, impoverished and with similar symptoms, who had not been seen during the day, suddenly appeared at the door of the hospital early in the morning. There must be a problem. God knows where it came from, God knows if there was anyone behind it, God knows if there are people with ulterior motives hiding among these people. Although Sarah is by his side and Bernard is by his side, for your own safety, it is better to be fully protected and be vigilant. Sarah smiled at him, said nothing, and moved a step closer to him. Gretel raised his voice again. Who is your leader? Where does he come from? There was a commotion among the refugees in front of them. Some people opened their mouths to answer, but Greet couldn't understand a word. Is it a dialect, or another language? It's Carolingian. Behind him, a priestess from the spring temple walked quickly and whispered to Greet. Seeing Gretel looking at her inquiringly, she smiled confidently. In the early years, there were relatively frequent exchanges between the royal capital and the opposite side. We also discussed healing techniques with people from the glorious Holy See. These people spoke Carolingian with a slight accent, but it was true that the language is right. So, are they from across the strait? Under the rule of the glorious Holy See? Being driven to him for some reason? Greet's heart moved. He smiled at priestess. Then please ask them where they come from and what they are doing here. Priestess slowly stepped forward, stood behind Bernard, and raised her voice to ask questions from a distance. Greet took a picture of himself language proficient and listened quietly. It turns out that there are 3 groups of these people, and they don't know each other very well. They were just taken into prison as blood servants. They were originally going to be executed, but for some reason they were transported here again. Someone directed them to the entrance of the hospital. How long were you in jail? Have no idea. Who lucked it out? Have no idea. Who guided it? Still don't know. Gretel sighed. He turned to Bernard. Guide them to walk around the hospital wall and go to the back wall. Then ask the logistics to bring them some food and wait for me to see them when I have time. Don't block them here. They will start to be discharged and admitted in a while. It's scary. It won't be good if it comes to other people. The savages swung the bolts and shouted loudly. With priestess translation, the refugees finally stood up in 2s and 3s, supported and pulled each other, and walked towards the back wall. Gretel kept staring at them and saw that most of them moved smoothly, but a few had dull eyes and needed to be yelled at or pulled by someone to move forward. In particular, a short man with sloppy steps turned around several times and stared directly at him. Tupac DeMille is so sorry. He spent a lot of money to paint his face and hands to look like these patients, and even the skin under his clothes was made up. He even chewed a glass bottle, causing his gums and lips to bleed, which was so hot. In this way, he blended into the crowd of homeless people, taking advantage of the fact that the three groups of people didn't know each other very well, pretending to be mentally ill, and squatted inside. They just hope that the Nordmark mage will come out to see them so that they can seize the opportunity to assassinate them. Alas, this mage is too cautious and does not approach them. It seems that he will have to stay among the refugees for a few more days. Gretel didn't notice anything unusual about this person. He was just thinking and identifying the source of these people's symptoms. Is it cold and hungry? Or are there people with mental illness or abnormal intellectual development in this group of people? Or, he thought quickly. Priestess has turned around with a serious face. Sir, do you want to treat them? You have to take a look, right? Gretel's eyes kept falling on the refugees, watching them move slowly, farther and farther away. They've all come to my door. It's not good to have the heart to drive them away like this. But are these people really not vampires? Your Excellency, you have a distinguished status and are about to treat the queen. It is best not to. They are not vampires. Gretel shook his head decisively. Sarala said that they don't have the aura of vampires, and I trust her judgment. Besides, I will set up defensive spells, so even if something goes wrong, they can't hurt me. It's better not to get close to them. After a while, Joanna hurried over and went over to observe them. The female priest of the Natural God Church quickly turned back with a worried look on her face. Sir, I think you have noticed that they all have similar symptoms. I suspect it is leprosy. If not leprosy, it is another infectious disease. She looked back at the obstetrics building, her brows tangled. Sir, this is a hospital, and the patients are the weakest mothers and newborns. We shouldn't keep them around. It's not leprosy, Gretel responded firmly. He had already thought of this possibility, so when he spoke, he paid special attention to the redness and scales on the faces of the refugees, as well as the stretched out fingers. The eyebrows and other hair have not fallen out, the skin lesions on the face are distributed symmetrically, the skin lesions on the hands have changed like gloves, and the fingers are not deformed or even defective. These are not consistent with the symptoms of leprosy, they are definitely not. Of course, other infectious diseases still need to be prevented. Greet asked people to come out and spray disinfectant along the roads where the refugees walked, while he also asked people to prepare rubber isolation suits. Don't worry, even if it's an infectious disease, if I wear an isolation suit to visit them and disinfect according to the regulations later, I won't be infected. If I let them run around, something will happen. But this matter needs to be reported. With this group of people coming here, I don't know how many conspiracies are waiting behind me. The matter of the refugees was quickly reported to Lord Graf, who in turn reported it to Baroness Viteg. Before 8 o'clock in the morning, the Baroness hurried over on a fast horse. Where are those refugees? Don't worry, Master Mage, someone will be here to take them away soon. They will never be left here to cause trouble to you and the Queen. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of